Honourable Member for Timmins James Bay.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As always, a great honour to rise in this House, although I do find in my 20 years that I've seen this House sometimes not live up to the standards and the credibility. And people expect us to come here, to be their voice, to be a voice that brings some kind of hope and direction. And I don't see that here most days. Most days it's become a very dumbed down and vicious affair. And when I think today that we have the Leader of the Opposition once again demanding an election. He demands an election. We haven't seen really much from him, except he wants the election right now. Yesterday he wanted an election right then, and the House stood up and voted non-confidence in him, because there is no trust in the Conservative leader. And this is because, Madam Speaker, we have such serious issues facing us as a nation and as a planet. And the Leader of the Opposition is not a serious leader for dealing with it. We could be here talking this morning about the homeless crisis. It is a devastating crisis. And we know that the Liberals have failed multiple times on their housing plans. But the Leader of the Opposition, who lives very well in a 19-room mansion at Stornoway with his own private chef, what is his plan? He attacks the municipalities. He ridicules our mayors. When he comes to Northern Ontario, he doesn't bother to meet with any of the frontline people who are trying to solve the housing crisis. He says he's going to go after them and call them gatekeepers. That's not a plan. That's a slogan. We talk about the rising issue of food bank use. The Conservatives, they wipe crocodile tears every time they talk about hungry children, and yet they voted against a national nutrition plan for schools. New Democrats brought forward, pushed the government to say we need to address it, we need to fill these gaps. But the Leader of the Opposition, again, who has his own private chef, seems to be out of touch with that. We have a huge opioid crisis devastating our communities. And what did the Leader do and his MPs? They viciously attacked medical doctors and frontline nurses to the point that doctors who are literally trying to keep people alive have faced death threats. That's not acceptable. It's not acceptable that MPs face death threats from the mob, who every day I see Conservatives out patting them on the back, people who are out there threatening and attacking Indigenous MPs, attacking women MPs, attacking racialized MPs, but to be attacking medical doctors and threatening them. That's not what a leader does. And yet that is the tactics of the Leader of the Opposition, and he wonders why we don't have confidence in him running our country. We have a huge international crisis. We have a number of them. The situation in Lebanon and Gaza is a humanitarian disaster that is unfolding. And yet the member for Edmonton Manning had nothing to say about the threats facing the Lebanese Canadians and the Lebanese people. He had nothing to say about it. Because in the Conservative caucus, if you don't repeat the talking points, you don't get the gold star and you sit on the back bench. That's not leadership. We are all brought here to represent our communities. And so in Edmonton Manning, where the Lebanese community is living in terror from the Israeli air assaults, for a member to say nothing because he wants to get the gold star from the leader who lives in the big mansion in Stornoway by repeating and repeating the same dumbed-down slogans, people's lives are at risk. We're watching.
I have a point of order from the honourable member for Barrie Innisfil.
Mr. Speaker, I think the honourable member should read the member from Edmonton Manning's tweet, because he did actually do something yesterday about it. Thank you. So my point is,
The honourable member Barrie Innisfil.
My point is that he's spreading misinformation and disinformation in the House.
Point of order. I appreciate the input. The honourable member for Timmins James Bay.
Thank you, Speaker. I invite the member for Edmonton Manning to actually come in the House and say it. I don't read his Twitter feed. Who does? Not many. I know they read mine, certainly. But, you know, this is, again, the lack of seriousness about a horrific humanitarian disaster, a genocide that's happening in Gaza. People dying, the targeting of medical doctors, the targeting of civilians, the targeting of journalists. This is something in the House we would deal with. But what we've learned from the Leader of the Opposition is he has no interest in standing on the international stage. He ridicules the Prime Minister for staying at an expensive hotel. Well, he is the leader of a G7 country. I guess the Super 8 was booked that weekend when he went to London. But the Leader of the Opposition has to show a vision, and he doesn't have a vision. He has division. The opposition could have brought in a motion today on the crisis we're facing in our medical system. But the Leader of the Opposition has no vision on that. He has bumper sticker slogans. And he's now saying, you know, his great favorite word is radical and extremist, that providing diabetes medication to people who need it is a radical idea. No, that's just plain human decency. That's what we should be doing in Canada. But decency isn't part of this leader's mantra. What we have is a leader who has taken the fears and uncertainties of Canadians and pushed them down into dumbed-down slogans that he has insisted that every member on his team repeat. I've been in 20 years in the House. I've never seen so many people reduced to these kind of caricature rhyming schemes. It's like a toxic Dr. Seuss, that they repeat these again and again. You know, I don't like green eggs and ham. I don't like them Sam I am. I don't like that carbon tax. That's not leadership. That's not leadership. But again, I got a laugh out of them. They smiled, they wake up because they're used to hearing these dumbed down slogans. That's not leadership. So I'm wondering, why is it that the leader, who I've known for 20 years and I feel is fundamentally unfit for public leadership in any capacity, why is he so desperate to call an election now? Well, I think there's a number of reasons. And these are the reasons I think that he does not want to be questioned about. Because he's got an incredibly thin skin. You notice that he said his carbon tax. Well, Ken Busenskool, who is a longtime conservative, said he's just not serious. He said that. He's not serious about the carbon tax. He says, I don't see any government in the future getting rid of that. Look, there's a huge gap between what conservatives say and what conservatives do. I hate to admit this, but Jason Kenney ran on AXA tax, and he beefed up the industrial carbon tax in Alberta. Danielle Smith ran on AXA tax, and she not only beefed up the industrial carbon tax, she said it was going up to $170 per ton. And when we asked the leader who lives in the mansion in Stornoway what his view of the industrial carbon tax was, he said it didn't exist. He doesn't like to be questioned. No wonder he's so mad at CTV. No wonder he's so mad at CBC. No wonder he attacks Global TV. He doesn't want the questions. He's trying to stay ahead. That's why he wants to force an election. And I do think it's really important to point out that with the foreign interference inquiry, we now have documents that have been tabled that said that Aaron O'Toole believes he was taken down as leader of the Conservative Party by foreign interference. Those are the documents. Now, we know many on the cabal over there supported the takedown of Aaron O'Toole. And the one who benefited was the man who's now living in Stornoway. So why is it he's not willing to be in the House to answer questions about foreign interference in his caucus? Maybe that's why he's trying to force this election. These are really important questions. And of course, I think the other reason he's trying to force an election is to stay ahead of the extremists in his caucus. The member for Cypress Hills Grasslands, who went down to Florida to vow that he would end the rights of women to make choices on their body, while we see down in the United States women dying in parking lots, bleeding to death internally from not being able to get a proper abortion. This is what the member for Cypress Hills Grassland would say. We know the member for Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan, who brought on the Canadian dime a legislator from Uganda who called for the death penalty for gay people. Stop and think about that. The member for Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan, had Canadians pay to bring someone who wanted to bring the death penalty to gay people. That's his caucus. And so when we see the degrading and debased behavior in this House, when we see these really ugly slurs against the Prime Minister of the country, and not one Conservative will stand up and admit that they were the ones who said it, it's because they hide behind their hate machine. But we see them. We have it on tape, and we see the footage, and we know those who are making the hate, and we know that people like the member for Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan, can only get away with it as long as the light's not shone on them, and we will continue to shine that light.